Hello and welcome back. We're here talking about political beliefs and behaviors, the nature and measurement of public opinion. In the last video, looking at the nature of public opinion, we talked about what public opinion is, as well as some perspectives of how public opinion is looked at in American democracy. We talked about the importance of majority rule, that elections are decided by the majority of individuals or a plurality of individuals that vote. We talked about as well the equality of opinions, that in some instances, minority opinions are taken into account when looking at particular policy issues. We also talked about the importance of interest groups as well as elites in framing public opinion. That is, how do they communicate about public opinion in a way that then allows voters and individuals in the United States to understand often complex public policy issues. And that's what we're going to continue to focus on in this particular video. We're going to be looking at the nature of public opinion as it trickles through the American public from elites at a higher level in the US government. So when we think about the flow of opinions in a political system, we have what is called political elites at the top, as I've been talking with you about. These are what are known as opinion leaders. These are individuals who might have knowledge about a particular policy issue. So for example, issues of war and peace in the United States oftentimes are handled by members of the Department of Defense, as well as the State Department, the Justice Department. And the key thing to understand is these individuals, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense, as well as the individuals that work for them, these are political elites who have some knowledge that the public doesn't have about complex issues of war and peace in the United States. So when we think about how that would flow to the American public, what we have here is what is known as the two-step flow model of political communication. So Elihu, Katz, and Paul Lazarsfeld in 1955 came up with this model of understanding how does public opinion flow through the political process. And they came up with what is known as the two-step model. The two-step model here starts with this notion that you have mass media. You have individuals in the mass media, news outlets, news organizations, journalists who study and report on particular issues that might be affecting, for example, the American economy. Mass media will then send out those messages to elite members of the public. These are the opinion leaders. So this is characterized here by the four heads on the model that you're seeing. So these are the opinion leaders in the American public. These could be pundits. These could be members of Congress. These could be other political leaders. But the important thing is they get these messages and they distill them then for their particular networks. So you see the very awkwardly drawn four smaller heads around each of the other larger heads in the model. And the key thing to understand here is that these opinion leaders then are the ones that relay these messages to the public. And you might be thinking here, well, this makes sense when you think about something like, how does a tweet go viral? How does a video go viral? And this is actually something that political communication scholars have looked at in the sense of how do we understand contemporary media information getting out there through social media, through Snapchat, through Facebook, through Twitter. And many researchers have come back to this basic model from 1955 when Twitter was a long way off, when the internet was a long way off, when TV was just being introduced into American households. And what you see here is that you have an information apparatus, in this case mass media, broadcasting information to opinion leaders, and these opinion leaders then broadcast that information to members of the public. And this is how you can think of how oftentimes public opinions can flow top down in American democracy. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that opinions can't flow bottom up in American democracy. In fact, researchers have looked at social media and new communication technologies as ways for elected officials and those at the top of the power hierarchy in American government politics to understand opinions that might not necessarily be held by political elites, but might be held by members of the public. So what are these opinions that we encounter? If we're following political elites, if we're following our favorite pundit on Fox News or MSNBC, if we read, for example, Peggy Noonan's opinions in the Wall Street Journal every weekend, what types of opinions are we encountering? What types of opinions do we see in the political system? What we know, based on research in political science and communication, is if we're encountering opinions about politics, most likely these opinions already agree with our partisan affiliation and predispositions. So why is this? The big reason behind this is a process known as partisan selective exposure. It's this idea that when we seek out information, when we're seeking out political opinions, we seek out political information that is oftentimes favorable to our political beliefs. Sometimes we know this, sometimes we don't know this. So for example, Pew Research data indicates that Republicans watch Fox News more than Democrats do. In turn, Democrats watch CNN and MSNBC more than Republicans do. So that is a selectivity process. We selectively expose ourselves to information that agrees with our partisan dispositions. And one of the big reasons for this is we don't like what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. We don't like having competing cognitions flowing around in our heads, confusing us. So it's easier to take in information and take in political opinions that already agree with who we are as a political partisan, whether Republican or Democrat. The important thing here is that ultimately what happens in some cases is these opinions bolster our pre-existing beliefs. They make us less tolerant of other beliefs out there, and they can cause political polarization in some instances. So they can cause a hardening of our pre-existing political beliefs. So when we think about our particular networks of individuals, our family, our friends, and where we get information from, so we could think of it as the opinion leader that we get our information from and the network of that opinion leader. Most likely that network also agrees with our political beliefs in a lot of ways. So we, on a regular basis, as partisans in the United States, don't necessarily expose ourselves to information that disagrees with our political beliefs. And this is what political communication scholars call the echo chamber effect. So you're in a cave and you yell and you hear an echo bouncing around. That echo is ultimately your existing voice, your existing perspective, and this is the echo chamber effect. That ultimately the voices we hear in our political networks or the voices we hear in our social networks about politics are oftentimes echoing what we think as well. So this is the echo chamber. Interestingly enough, the Wall Street Journal has actually put together a very fascinating infographic trying to understand what our Facebook feeds look like when we only expose ourselves to information that either agrees with our political beliefs or disagrees with our political beliefs. So I encourage you to click on this particular link to look at the Wall Street Journal infographic. So this Wall Street Journal infographic, known as Blue Feed and Red Feed, gets you to understand what a liberal Facebook and conservative Facebook would look like. And this is not necessarily Facebook making these decisions. These are the decisions that we unconsciously and consciously make to expose ourselves to information about politics that agrees with our political beliefs. So I encourage you to scroll through this website and take a look at what this would look like. You can click on a topic about anything. So for example, we could click on a topic about Barack Obama and understand what a Facebook feed, what a conservative Facebook feed would look like about Barack Obama, and what some of the news would be like on a conservative's Facebook feed. And then you can compare that to what a liberal's Facebook feed would look like, what a progressive's Facebook feed would look like in terms of the information that they're sharing. And what you see is that conservatives and liberals live in two separate worlds. They consume many, many different types of information. So when we go back to public opinion and thinking about what we're talking about in this particular section of the course, you can see how opinions among partisans can be so vastly different at any one time. So I hope that Wall Street Journal infographic gives you a better idea of the nature of public opinion when we think about the importance of partisanship in American political life. So now that we've covered that, what we're going to do in the next video is actually look at how do public opinion scholars measure public opinion. So we're going to be looking at how public opinion scholars talk to voters about the opinions that they have and how they measure them, aka also known as public opinion polling. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video.